Signal detection theory is a way to understand how our brain perceives and detects signals in the presence of noise. So, signal detection theory has two functions or two parameters. One is called the hit and the other one is called the false alarm. The sensitivity of a sensory organ can be measured by comparing the hit rate and the false alarm rate, where hit rate means correctly detecting a stimulus and false alarm means incorrectly detecting a stimulus. This measure of sensitivity is denoted as D prime and it is calculated as the difference between the hit rate and the false alarm rate. We calculate D prime by subtracting the false alarm rate from the hit rate, which means the rate of hit minus the rate of false alarm. So when we want to measure how well the system can detect signals, or the sensitivity of many systems depends on how often it correctly detects signals, which is hit rate, and how often it incorrectly detects signals when there are no signals, which is false alarm rate. Similarly, there is another thing or another measure we look at is called beta, which represents the bias of a system and which means how likely it is to say that a signal is present even when there is no signal. By using a method called signal detection analysis, we can separate the process of detecting a signal into two parts. One is sensitivity, which means how well the system can detect signals, and another one is bias, which means how likely the system is to say a signal is present when there is no signal. This analysis is useful because it helps us understand how well a system is detecting signals and whether it's biased towards detecting signals even when signals are not there. Now, since there is a lot of noise in our brains, it can be hard to detect very small changes in the light. So, a new method was designed to test people's ability to detect the light. In the candle experiment, some trials started with no light while others started with a light. People had to say when they saw the light. So there are 4 different parameters that can be measured. Let's try to make a simple table of those parameters and try to understand more about signal detection theory. So basically in our experiment, there are 4 parameters. So we are looking at 2 different conditions. Number 1 is no light and number 2 is yes light. And then we are looking at 2 possible responses from participants, which one is yes, I see the light, and the second one is no, I don't see the light. So let's make a simple table to organize this information. So the first column would represent the physical stimulus, which means whether there is light or not, while the first row would represent the psychological stimulus, which means whether the participants report seeing the light or not. So this is my physical stimulus in terms of light present or not, and this is my psychological stimulus, which is if I see the light or not. There are 4 different things that can happen. The goal of this experiment is to determine how sensitive the system is to detecting the stimulus. We are trying to understand how well the participant can detect the stimulus in the presence or absence of noise. And in this case, what happens is that during our experiment, we have some trials where we use a candle and the participant has to say if they see the light or not. Other times, we don't use the candle and it's completely dark. And again, the participant is asked if they see the light or not. From this, we get 4 different possibilities. So if the light is present and the person says, yes, I see the light, this is called hit. Then if the light is present and the subject says there is no light, it's called a miss. Now if no light is present and the person says that he sees the light, it is called false alarm. And then if there is no light and the participant or subject also responds, no, I don't see the light, it's called a correct rejection. And this is the easiest explanation of what signal detection theory is. So basically there are 4 parameters to consider in this experiment. whether there is a light or not, which is a physical stimulus, and whether the person says yes or no to seeing the light, which is a psychological stimulus. While the physical stimulus remain constant, the psychological responses of I see the light or I don't see the light is influenced by mental noise or internal factors, and that can affect their ability to accurately perceive what's happening.